Promoted to a panelist. All right, here
There
we
you
go.
go.
How are you?
What's up, man?
Hey, having a great and beautiful Saturday in Golden, Colorado here. Things are going all right.
Glad to hear it. What's up, Michelle?
Hi, how are you guys? Good to see your faces.
Good to see you too.
Yes.
And Kikkan on here. And where's Jeanine?
Hello, everybody.
And I guess I'll bring Emily back. All right, welcome to the second panel, Stoked From Home. Thank you so much for all being a part of this. This is really exciting.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so good to hear.
Yeah, Jonathan, thanks for having us.
Totally. No, this is it's amazing to see how many people came together so fast, just to rally around bringing some extra outdoor inspiration to the outdoor community as we're all stuck inside. So I guess let's just first go around the table here, and if you can all just quickly introduce yourselves for anybody who has not heard your episode on the Stokecast or been in your world in the past. Jason, let's start.
Sure. I'm Jason Antin. I raised in New England, but been a Colorado resident for over a decade now. Live out in Golden, Colorado with my girls, my wife Jenny, my 3.5-year-old daughter Avery, and my 1-month-old Andorra. I work as a guide and a coach. I coach mountain athletes, and I like to get outside and blend outdoor adventure that combines technical skills and endurance, and like getting out for long days with good folks.
Awesome, man. We're psyched to have you here. Keegan?
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Kikkan Randall, and I am a cross-country skier. I was raised in Alaska, and now I live in BC. So I went to 5 Olympics as a cross-country skier. And when I first got in the sport, no American woman had ever won an Olympic medal. So it was kind of my goal to try and break that ceiling. And it took 5 tries, but in the Pyeongchang Games, my teammate and I ended up winning a gold medal in the team sprint, which was just an incredible feeling to break through that goal that we'd had so long, but to do it with a team. I'm a big team player. So that was super exciting. And with that, I was happy to close out my professional racing career and move into some new roles. And about 3 months after we won that gold medal, I discovered that I had breast cancer. Just happened to find it on a whim, and went through the full session of breast cancer treatment and really got to see how all my skills as an athlete and being an outdoor athlete especially really prepared me to take on that challenge. And ironically, a lot of those skills are coming in handy now as we face this situation. But like Jason, I love the outdoors, I love doing it with people, and I love challenge.
So awesome. I want to double click into what you just said in a second, but let's get around the intros, and then I want to come back to what you were just talking about utilizing those skills in terms of now, right? Michelle, how are you? Thanks for being a part of this.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, my name is Michelle Parker, and I was born and raised in Squaw Valley and kind of grew up there, and I live in Lake Tahoe now. I'm in Tahoe City in my quarantine right now. I'm a professional skier, grew up racing, then went to like half pipe and park skiing, did the first ever X Games that women were a part of for my sport, and then since got really into big mountain skiing and found a passion for climbing, and combined that with big mountain skiing made me more have a lot more opportunity in the way that I approach the mountains, and now kind of ski mountaineering. And yeah, big mountain filming is kind of my go-to, but yeah, whenever I'm not filming, I'm doing human powered ascents, and that's what I do.
Awesome. And Jeanine.
Hey, so I'm not an athlete. I like to be the one who's kind of got a different angle in the group, though. My name is Jeanine Pesce. I'm the founder of Range, which is a creative agency and a magazine in the outdoor industry. Similar to the two other women on the panel, I am one of the first female founders of a creative agency in the outdoor industry. Although I don't work directly with athletes, I work directly with the brands that sponsor their athletes, and I help their creative and product teams develop better product, better marketing campaigns, better stories, better content. And I kind of funnel it all through the lens of good design and closing the loop between people, product, and planet. And that's super important work for me. And I'm based in Vancouver, British Columbia.
So beautiful. That's incredible. All right. Well, thank you all again for being part of our second panel here. So let's just go back. Let's start with Kikkan. I would love to hear a little bit more about what you're talking about in terms of those skills that you developed through that battle and how you're applying that to what is, what's going on with our current battle.
Yeah, so it's funny, like being a cross-country skier for such a long term, you really had to develop kind of the idea of taking a big goal and breaking it down into small enough chunks to where it felt attainable to work on every single day. So for me, that was my sitting down with my coaches after my first Olympics and going, all right, how am I going to work my way to being a medal contender? And then when I started cancer treatment, I was sitting down with my oncologist and going, okay, what do I have to do? What are the segments? How do I get to back to being healthy and doing all the things I want to do? And being able to kind of break it down to those steps was so helpful. So that literally, like every day I was going through chemo, I could put an X in the calendar and go, okay, I'm getting closer to my goal. Today was tough, but I'm getting closer to where I want. And I feel like now in this situation, it's maybe a little bit harder because we don't know what the end point is, but we do know what we want to be able to get back to doing. And so it's kind of like thinking like, all right, the world is in a mess right now, but what can I do today that's going to get me back to, or prepare me and put me in a place to where when things do open up again and we can go out and do all these things, I'm going to be ready. I'm going to be fit. I'm going to have my gear in order. I'm going to, be talking to friends and getting them fired up. So that was a big one. And then the second big one is, no matter what situation, there's always things that you can control and things you can't. In athletics, it was, the weather you couldn't control, your competitors you couldn't control. If you broke your equipment in mid-race, sometimes that was like, well, I just have to deal with it right now. And so going through cancer treatment, same thing, a lot you can't control, and that can quickly take over in your mind. You can get frustrated, you can get scared. But I decided to really try to focus my energy on the things that I could control. And that was trying to get out for a little physical activity every day. Even if it was only 10 minutes, it was pulling on really brightly colored socks as that colorful reminder that things were going to get better. And so here we are in this situation again, and there's a lot out of our control and there's a lot to be really worried about. But if you can kind of shift your focus onto things that we can do every day, I find that just kind of like, it keeps my mind in a better place, a more positive, optimistic place, and it gives me concrete things that I can also feel success as I go along. So yeah, those themes really just kind of keep coming up. And I forgot to mention my intro. I'm a mom to a 4-year-old, and again, a lot of things you can't control, but teaching them to kind of work through situations and do that, those skills have really come in handy as well.
It's really interesting around the thinking about how when you're breaking down big objectives into those micro moments to get there, how it's generally easier when you know what you're trying to get to, right? And how you mentioned that like we don't necessarily know when the end of this is going to be. And it just makes me think back, like years ago I was leading like a fitness class at a rock gym and had people do, I just said like drop and start doing burpees, and didn't tell them how many they had to do or how long it was going to go, and then stopped it after like 40 seconds and then was like, all right, now we're going to go for 2 minutes. And they found it easier to go for 2 minutes than it was for 40 seconds because they knew how far they had to go, right? With that, Jason, I'd love you to jump in, because I know that a lot of our conversation the last time we connected was around this balance of time, of the time you were spending with your family at home versus the projects, with Beat Monday, pursuing these, like, how much can you do within, a weekend? How far can you go? How epic can it be? So you're well-versed in trying to make the most of particular time. I'm curious your perspective on that right now.
Yeah. No, it's actually been really fascinating, and psychologically, it's come at a decent time because I have a newborn, and so right when she was born on March 10th, so right when this happened, I had already psychologically prepared myself for a little hunkering downtime, and so it didn't hit me as hard to kind of feel like I was chained to the home office, like we've all been for the last month or so. So mentally, it was okay to prepare for that, but typically, probably like everyone else on this panel, I don't really like downtime. I like to be constantly going. And as Jonathan mentioned, the whole Beat Monday project was a spreadsheet of pretty fun missions that you could attempt in a typical weekend. So your typical Saturday, Sunday, and has evolved into a pretty cool string of adventures, and the list continues to grow. And but as far as time management goes, with this whole experience, it's changed a little bit. My elbows are not from being on my desk for the longest they've probably been in a while, just being on the laptop so much. So I guess to answer your question, it's definitely been a change of pace. I'm brainstorming fun ways to have adventure around the house. I think my oldest daughter, Avery, we're planning a bike packing trip, and I think our campsite's gonna be our backyard, and we'll see how many loops we can do around the neighborhood before we end up back here. Yeah, it's definitely, I'm starting to get a little stir crazy, but it's been nice with the newborn, and I've been able to kind of take a step back and appreciate being home with the girls a little bit more than maybe I wouldn't be if I didn't have a 1 month-year-old or 1 month old.
Yeah. Well, congrats on the new baby also. That's amazing. I think last time we talked, obviously, your wife was still pregnant at the time. So that's awesome. Speaking of creative ways to engage your kids, Jeanine, I saw that you had an inside camping trip for your daughter, right? Yesterday? Was that, how are you managing with, obviously running a creative agency and also having kids at home full time? How's that going?
Yeah, it's fascinating. It is an experiment in all sorts of, I think the word surrender has come up a few times. You definitely have to surrender to the process. So I'm a New Yorker, but I'm based in BC, and my husband works for Arc'teryx, and him and I split our days where I get 4 hours to work and he gets 4 hours to work, because we were doing like 1-for-1, and like we couldn't really get much done past jumping on a call. There wasn't time for like critical thinking between calls, so we decided to split our days up into these big kind of windows, and it's working better for us. But our daughter is 4 also, and she's very feral and like super, has like tons of energy and needs to be outside all the time. So when one of us starts working, the other takes her outside, and either it's like laps around the neighborhood, quick hikes close to the house. She's obsessed with her bike. She's obsessed with just like general exploration and adventuring. So it's kind of, in that sense, it's easier to keep her busy because we can kind of stick to this routine with her. As long as we're outside, she's happy. We find that when we're inside with her trying to, we do crafts and things like that, but like she'll just immediately be like, well, let's watch television. It's so much easier. Like throw the TV on. And we're like, ah. And because she's not old enough for like, the homeschooling, there's not a lot of structure there. So it's either like constant play or constant adventure, and like work is harder to squeeze in. So we have to she keeps telling us like, I'm going to take your cell phones away, and I'm going to take your laptop away. And like, oh, you're done with your call. Can we play now? So, Coop and I that's my husband, Cooper. We've been like really just trying to get like, just be very patient with each other, and our teams have been really patient with us, and I think that's a big part of it. And then so last night we took part in this kind of a bit of an industry little it was called Camp In For Your Lives was the hashtag. Our friends at Hi Hey Hello set it up, and we set up 2 tents in our living room, and just put a fire on in the fireplace, and she was over the moon. She loved it. She was like the best thing we could have done. And she woke up at about 3:45, and the moon was really bright, and we live on the water, so we could, the water was alive, and everything was just like alive. And it was amazing to see her have this intimate moment with the outdoors from the comforts of our own home. But like her senses lit up. She was like, I see the moon and I see the ocean, I can see the water. And it was just kind of like so simple and so beautiful. So it was a profound moment. And I guess, again, nature can be wherever you want it to be.
Yeah, I love that, because I feel like a lot of the times when we lose like why we first love the outdoors in the first place, we can just like look at a child's face as they're experiencing like a flower, and you can be like, oh, that is the feeling that I'm always chasing, like that amazement of just these small moments as you're outside. Man, that got me little goosebumps, Jeanine. Jeez.
Yeah, it was cool. Like, wow, 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 the moon. It's been there. We just had the curtains closed, you know.
Didn't want the glare on the TV before this.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's beautiful. How to infuse those moments to bring you back to that sense of wonder that we often fall ourselves, fall away from.
I think this entire experience is an opportunity for everyone to get back to the simple things.
Yeah.
And just remember, like, what brings us and connects us. That human connection we have in the outdoors is what's so unique and special about all of us.
And Michelle, speaking of time, I know you just had a birthday, right? Happy birthday.
Yesterday, thank you.
You're
Yes.
welcome.
It
So,
was an amazing birthday in quarantine. It was like one of my best birthdays, gotta say.
well, how'd you spend it?
I went for a long walk with my family, my mom, my dad, and my brother. They're quarantined together, so we kept our distance, but went for a walk that was beautiful, and then walked up and down my block and I've met so many neighbors, so we had a little block party, and they all sang happy birthday outside, and that was really fun.
Oh.
And then Aaron, my boyfriend, he drew pictures of the presents that he was going to get me, which was really sweet too. So he wrapped those up in boxes, and I opened them up, and there was like this beautiful drawing of like outdoor lights for our deck and stuff like that. So that was special. And then he threw a surprise Zoom birthday party call. And I don't know, just seeing like all these different friends from so many different walks of life come together in one place. It was like kind of a beautiful way to celebrate. And I was really appreciative. It was like an awesome quarantine birthday.
That's really great.
That's so creative. I love it.
Yeah, it was really cute. And then he cooked amazing meals, and I was like, well, this is extra special now.
Also love that everybody is cooking more right now. It's so good.
Yeah, big time. That's been my kind of guilty pleasure of quarantine is sourdough bread and homemade pasta.
Yes, I actually just made my first loaf of sourdough this morning. I was working on a starter for like the last 2 weeks.
Awesome. Yeah, the time is now. Starters are hard for me to keep alive, but I got some from a neighbor the other day, and that's been a good guilty pleasure that also motivates me to stay really active.
Yeah, totally. That's awesome. Well, so let's stick on how this has impacted your professional life, right? Like what was on your short-term horizon or even long-term horizon that you were planning for, training for, projects, objectives that have now needed to be delayed? Like how has this kind of changed your world in the moment?
Yeah, well, the last 2 years I worked really hard on producing Originate, which was an online series with Red Bull and Arc'teryx, and that was super successful, and it was 2 years just like grinding it out and kind of working from January all the way through December, seeing it through as a producer and wearing a different hat than just the athlete, which was really enjoyable for me. But ultimately, after 2 years of doing that, I kind of wanted to take a step back and go back into just the athlete role and see how I could ski and kind of just film with Matchstick again and take that pressure off my back. But also, like January and February, I was like, I'm going to be really diligent about connecting with my sponsors and doing that stuff. So March came around, it was my first time filming, and I was about a week into filming. And basically that's like a big goal of every single year is to produce an athlete segment for a movie. And so I was like 5 days into it with one sunny day, and then basically had to pull the ripcord and leave Canada. I was up there, and I had been paying quite close attention to it because I was in Japan earlier on an Arc'teryx trip. And, I started wearing a face mask in Japan. They had closed all the schools in February, and almost pulled the pin on the trip and flew home early. So I remember like flying all the way from Japan with a face mask, landing in San Fran. And honestly, just the cultural difference of, face masks are a lot more acceptable there. And then I landed in San Fran, and it was like nothing was happening. And I like took my face mask off and was like, I guess I don't need this anymore, and threw it away. And then it was kind of life as usual, but I was really like heightened. Like I didn't really want to have dinner with my parents. I was like, what if I have it? And I just traveled from Japan. So I was keeping my distance, doing the hand sanitizer thing since then. And ultimately it just stopped my season hard, and I drove home and have been sheltered in place ever since. But we had a lot of amazing trips coming up, which I guess going through so many injuries in my career, it felt like that, like, okay, your season's over. So it wasn't really hard for me to accept, especially considering what the rest of the world is feeling right now and going through. And I was like, well, I'm actually super lucky. I've got a roof over my head. And so I wasn't bummed. I just came back to Tahoe and sheltered in place. And ultimately now I'm kind of like setting short-term goals that may or may not happen, like some bike trips to skiing volcanoes, and who knows if that'll happen or not, but that's at least keeping me really motivated to get on my indoor spin bike and go really hard. And yeah, I've just been taking it day by day and trying to stay well informed. And for me, I'm a person that bleeds with other people. And so I'm really empathetic. So like at least once a day, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, like sometimes it's tears of like beauty and seeing how the world is coming together. And other times it's like a little bit of grieving. But yeah, it's been overall an enjoyable quarantine, and I just feel really lucky.
That's awesome. So I'm curious, anybody else can jump in. Like, do you feel more pressure to be productive right now, or are you letting yourself kind of kick back and just enjoy, the moment and your surroundings? Like, where are you on that spectrum as far as needing to have some kind of goal in place that you, whether it happens or not, you're like doubling down on training or working on a new business creative project, or are you just kind of, hanging out, making bread, and like relaxing as if it's like an injury? I like that you drew that parallel.
I think for me anyways, like taking it like an injury has, obviously it's forced downtime. And I find with that forced downtime is when my mind naturally becomes more creative and I start brainstorming more about like things that I want to do in the future. And it's been a really beautiful time to reflect and really kind of hone in on those creative projects. And I've kind of discovered through this that that's a process I need to go through. When I'm like pinned all the time, I don't have time to be creative and to like put those thoughts on paper and really dive deeper into them and develop them further than just an idea. So it's been a cool moment to do that.
I find it's an interesting dilemma. I think mostly because of the kid factor. On one hand, I spent 2019, I finished treatment and I was on the road 220 days, like involved in all sorts of projects and all sorts of cool stuff. And after being gone and going so crazy, I was like, man, I wish I could just be home. And kind of got what I wished for a little bit. And so now I'm home, and on one hand, I'm just like treasuring the time with my son, that I can just completely slow down, that I'm just here and really like not even like trying to rush anywhere in town, like here at home, just really quality time. And I'm soaking that up. But at the same time, I am finding the wheels are turning, and I am like thinking of all these things that I want to do, but I can't find the time to like really go on it. So, when I do get a few moments, I'm like kind of starting to go down that path, but then also going, you know what, this is the time to be with my son. So it's a back and forth. It is really interesting.
There is a question here from Haley who says, I hate that my kids see me stare at technology so much. I don't want them to think I'm ignoring them. What other tips do you have to teach your kids when you are working and when you can play? Like how do you set those expectations or boundaries?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's challenging. I'm trying not to like stigmatize screens right now, because I think coming out of this like I just read an article actually in the New York Times, like it's fascinating about like screens have won, like all this debate all these years for, should you let your kids have access to screens or not? Like the screens have won. Like they're doing Zoom calls now, they're FaceTiming with their friends or FaceTiming with their relatives, so I think it's about moderation really at the end of the day, like, and not necessarily stigmatizing the fact that like we are looking at technology because this is the future, especially if things like pandemics continue, like we will be home, we will be telecommunicating, there'll be a rise in telehealth, we'll be talking to our doctors on screens, things like that. So I think not stigmatizing it is a good tip. And then obviously everything in moderation, but when it's time for work and time for play, we just, we're really honest with our daughter about what we need to do. And this is actually maybe be helpful. We gave her a piggy bank, and we told her that if she wants to buy a new doll, she needs to save up money in her piggy bank. So we essentially have created this analogy where, like, when mommy's working, she's putting money in her piggy bank so that she can go out and buy the doll she wants, or go food shopping, or, we can go on a fun family trip or buy a new bicycle or something. So when mommy works, she needs to put money in her piggy bank. And she's like, oh, I get it. So when you're doing that, we're putting money in the piggy bank, and it's created this like bridge for her to visualize what comes on the other side of work. So like she has her piggy bank now, and she can put money in her piggy bank, and she knows that, like, if she saves money, she can meet whatever goals she's looking for. I mean, that might be complicated, but for us, it's working, because we're like, how can we explain what this idea of work is to her? Like, she doesn't understand, like, work, that's strange, I don't get it. So the piggy bank has kind of helped us create a little bit of like, mommy needs to work and put money in her piggy bank, just like daddy. And like, that seems to have worked for us.
Well, and that's hitting two birds with one stone, because you're also kind of helping her realize that you don't just get. Like, if you want a toy and you really want it, you gotta work for it.
She definitely wants to get right now. Like, every day it's like, give me that little hit of dopamine. Like, is there a surprise for me somewhere that you've hidden that I can uncover? Because it's like, it is that hit of dopamine. It's the same thing we get from like a like on Instagram. It's like, I got something. So we're trying to find that balance. In consumerism too, I mean, we're going to come out of this with a new relationship with the way we consume, whether that's products or food or just material items. And we want to set up that precedent for her now,
Around the screens of one thing, isn't it interesting that, people are spending more time on Zoom or video conferencing or FaceTime, or social media or any of that. Like, people are on their computer more than ever right now, but at the same time, people are outside more than ever right now, like seeking those trails, going for walks. And it's like, you wouldn't have necessarily predicted that if you thought, 6 months ago about like the rise of like more and more people on social and on tech and using their computer and working from home, that it would also coincide with more people being outside.
Yeah. It's fascinating.
I feel like when people are on tech so much more too, they're like, oh, I need to go outside. I haven't seen the sun today, so I need to maybe take a walk around my block.
Yeah.
Which is a really cool side effect. I kind of want to say cool, because that sounds a bit reductive, but a bizarre good side effect of
this. There's a compelling amount of research and data that shows us that nature is healing, right? And when we're cooped up and we're feeling like caged in, our instinct is to go out and to socialize and to like chase that calming effect that nature gives us. I mean, you actually produce more serotonin in your body when you touch dirt. Like, when you're around plants, your body creates like this calming energy. So I think it's a beautiful, and maybe it's because everything has been so black and white, it's like one or the other. You can't have both. Like, there is a lot of gray area to live in and explore right now, and to question. And maybe we can have this harmony of like digital and analog. Like, it can coincide in a way, as long as, again, it's with moderation.
Totally. One thing that we have talked about a decent amount is the, just in general, not just right now, but in general conversation, like what has been impacted as far as needing to be canceled or delayed right now. But I'm curious, in your worlds, what projects maybe were put on the fast track to actually like, let's, we've been working on this thing. It wasn't supposed to happen for another 6 months, but let's just put it out now, because it's something that might help people or might entertain. It's like, even the podcast, we didn't plan to bring the podcast back until like, later this year, maybe the summer, but here we are doing this, right? And Jason, I know you're like, the next season of Beat Monday is about to come out, right? Was that planned, or is that just like happenstance?
Yeah, a couple things on that front. So we filmed season 2, which were shorter episodes, about 5 to 7 minute episodes, and those were supposed to be released a while ago, but they got kind of fast tracked, or they got delayed and then fast tracked because we are teaming up with Outside again to do a 3rd season, and we were actually supposed to start filming last month, and so that did get pushed back quite a ways. We will be releasing the episodes that we filmed this past summer, so that's pretty cool. But I think aside from Beat Monday, the biggest things that's been fast tracked is on March 1st, I took a job with the Colorado Mountain School. And so for the rest of the folks on the panel, I mentioned I was a guide. And for those of you that also work outdoors, that's totally shut down. There's zero face-to-face going on right now. And the guiding community is really struggling. And at Colorado Mountain School, my job there was I was brought on to find new revenue streams with bigger groups. And my long-term strategy was to diversify how we connected with corporations and companies. And so March 1st, I started. March 10th, we shut down all operations. And basically my long-term plan to start working with companies more was fast-tracked. So we've rolled out what we're calling the RME, the Remote Mountain Experience. And we're finding ways to connect with companies who have these massive workforces that are working from their home offices, and they're getting antsy and they're isolated. And so we've been able to connect with some companies starting in Boulder and looking to expand outward where we're connecting guides. So keeping guides working, but virtually. So offering, whether it be highly technical experience. Yesterday we walked through a local Boulder company on a virtual tour of climbing Long's Peak, but also things that are a little bit more basic, like wilderness first aid 101, or how to pack your pack for backpacking here in Colorado. So just trying to keep people excited and inspired by the mountains, and keeping guys working, and just trying to mix up people's days a little bit, because I know what it's like to be, in my home office all day on the keyboard. And so that has been kind of fast tracked for me, is the connections with companies. I didn't intend on it being virtual, but that was certainly something that got brought to the front of the list, top of the list.
That's really cool. I mean, especially right now that I think we're, again, after this, I'm sure there will be a surge in remote work, and like, oh, hey, we're able to do this. And it offers, I think, a better, lifestyle balance, because you can kind of like go outside during the day, or, do your workout during the middle of the day if you can, or whatever. And so I'm sure that will just be an uptick in the ways that we engage with those employees, like large corporations or bigger businesses. So I really love that idea. I might bring that to my 9-to-5 job and see if they'll do something. Yeah, that's really cool. Is anyone else kind of doing a similar, it's been totally fast tracked, we have to start thinking differently in those ways?
I sit on the board of directors of the U.S. Olympic Committee, U.S. and Paralympic Committee. And there's, obviously been a lot of activity in the last 2 weeks about postponing the Olympic Games that were supposed to be in July of this year. But we were able to kind of reach out to the athletes, find out what their real-time concerns and conditions were, and then help push the postponement to next year, which just seemed to be the right decision for everybody. But along the way, we recognized that athletes are like everybody, but are under extreme kind of mental pressure right now, and their mental health is going to be more important than ever. And it's been a discussion that's been building about how we need to support athletes better with their mental health. But now that's been fast tracked. Like, they've come up with resources that are available now through telemedicine, just connecting and reaching with athletes right away. And that was something that was planned to happen by the end of this year, but it's already in place now. And it's been really cool to be able to get to some people, find out what their needs are, and get something in action right away. And I think that's going to be a resource that once we can develop for athletes, that can be built out for people as well, because everybody's kind of in that situation right now. So it's been cool to be a part of that process a little bit and see things move so quickly.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, I hope that also gets rolled out and can be kind of a pilot program for like running programs around the US, or not just running, but I feel like there's a lot of need there, right? For mental health capabilities as well through those teams. That's really cool.
Michelle, are you doing anything with Safe As virtually? Is there, any kind of big mountain education, or like, what can people do right now to prep for getting into the big mountains that, they can't go out and practice like glissading right now, or right?
I love that idea. Actually, we haven't done anything with Safe As right now. That's kind of something that we typically focus on, you know, all summer we're planning it, and then it hits December, January, and we move from there. But something that I've found, so Safe As is a clinic that we do, that we travel around to. It's myself and 3 other professional skiers and then a lead area level 1 instructor. It's your intro to level 1 backcountry skills. And basically those intro classes we found are so necessary. Like, how do you pack your backpack? How do you use your probe? How do you assemble your probe? Those basic skill sets are totally necessary before you enter a level 1, so you can go there a little bit more prepared. I mean, you can totally take a level 1 and feel prepared and do your thing, but I think that the intro is a niche that we're filling that, yeah, we could do some online stuff. You're kind of inspiring me to do that, but how you pack your pack, it's super simple, but a lot of people just forget the basics, and I think those things can be invaluable, especially right now, because it is so interesting. I know in Tahoe, our backcountry is still open and we're still forecasting, and people are getting out there. And I myself have gone out maybe like twice and felt really mixed about my feelings towards it. I did this way back like 3 weeks ago when I just got home, and I felt really uncomfortable with the amount of people that were out there, and the amount of people that were out there that clearly had never taken an avalanche course. And so that was my first kind of red flag. I was like, okay, maybe I'm not going to add to this problem, and maybe I'm just going to like actually be home and not be tempted by the mountains, which has been hard because that's my biggest passion. It's what I love to do, but it's also made me appreciate it so much more and realize really that like those skill sets are really necessary. Like, people calling, asking if they can rent beacons right now, it's not the time. Like, so yeah, that's a social responsibility I feel as a professional athlete and as a founder of Safe As. Like, yeah, trying to spread that knowledge and awareness is huge. And I think right now it's really evident, and it's so important with the ski resorts being closed, because people are going to do what they're going to do. And I'm trying not to be judgmental. I'm just trying to stay the course on what I believe is the right way to be acting right now, and not increase my risk. But yeah, you're inspiring me to do that. I think I'm going to do that.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear it. I think it's perfect timing to like think about what can you do more than just read Freedom of the Hills, right? Like how can you set up a Z pulley in your backyard and like start to practice those mechanics at home? I think that'd be amazing. You brought up a good point though, like the conversation around Emily and I touched on this a little bit in just like our single episode a couple weeks ago, where for forever we have looked at the outdoors as like that's the safe place, right? The outdoors is safe for us to go get away, to find ourselves, to reconnect with nature, to clear our heads, etc. And now for the first time, the outdoors are like, we as a community have to kind of take the stance that like, no, the outdoors are not the safe space. Like, you have to stay local, stay inside, stay mellow. And it's, I'm just curious how you're dealing with that, how any of you are coping with this conversation, this flip in the perspective that we need to dial it back and like, we can't go into our escape haven, right?
Yeah, no, I think, Jonathan, that's on my mind all day, every day, as I'm sure it is for the rest of you, but it's that conversation of what is acceptable outdoor recreation, everything from stay at home and just walk around your block to, I have friends that are still climbing regularly, traveling far, and everything in between. And so I think it's a combination of kind of personal ethics, your social responsibility, what groups are you connected to, and what do you have a responsibility to have to be part of that community voice. And then also your own risk tolerance. And, personally, I haven't touched a rock in a month. I haven't been backcountry skiing in over a month. And I don't know. I don't know if it feels like the right thing to do, but I'm just, I'm certainly confused by it a little bit. And I have conversations daily with friends that are, they're still skiing, they're still climbing. They don't know, it's a conversation, not an argument, but yeah, it's just, I'm certainly a little bit, it's a strong internal conversation that I have regularly on what exactly is the right thing to do. I've decided to take a step back just based on the groups I'm connected with and what I think is right. But I've been riding my gravel bike a lot, and you could argue that that's just as dangerous as climbing or skiing. So I don't know. It's an internal conversation that's had often in my household and in my own head.
Yeah, definitely in my own head. I've been struggling with that. I woke up one day and it wasn't supposed to be a bluebird powder day, and it was. And I came upstairs and I was like, I'm going to cry because I'm so sad. This is my favorite thing to do. And you're just like in the house. And, but it was okay. We had cross country trails open in my backyard that I can walk to, and they were open to season pass holders. And I did find that to be an acceptable form of exercise. And I went out there and cleared my mind and was like, yeah, this is a sacrifice that I'm totally willing to make. And I kind of realigned, like, after that moment of like grieving for this sport that I love, I realigned what is important to me right now, and being a conscious member of society. And that ultimately has helped me kind of redirect, like, no, I'm totally okay with like putting some things on the shelf right now and acting responsibly. And it is the level of risk that you're willing to take. And yeah, for me, I just want to, I don't know, I want to do my part.
That conversation around risk tolerance is really interesting because, you know, Michelle, you could go out and ski something incredibly, you know, more difficult and gnarlier than a lot of people might even consider, and you could probably do it safely. Like, your level of like safe skiing, risky terrain, is at a different level than a lot of people. But now we're kind of in this point where, like, doesn't really matter what your skill set is. It's like a leveling of the risk playing field, and like there's a line that we're trying to figure out, like, where is it not okay to cross, right?
Yeah, and it's such a mental conversation that is constantly on my mind, just like Jason. And I think ultimately, when you're in the backcountry, every single person in the backcountry you're with is a part of your team. Like, we all need to be working together out there. And when your backcountry gets hit really hard, and it's really hard to manage that ultimately was like the last pin for me. I was like, I'm good with that.
Yeah, and I think the thing that some people are really grappling with is like, yeah, it's my risk tolerance, but it's also just like, you never know. You really never, I mean, even if you're so experienced, things can still go wrong. So I think that is the thing too, that people are somehow forgetting that, okay, that's great that you're used to that level of risk, but there's also an opportunity for something to go wrong that you didn't necessarily expect or anticipate. So are you willing to risk that portion of it as well, when you normally do think of that, about that stuff? But I feel like risk means something a little differently right now.
Yeah, and communicating with people that are on the front lines in your local hospital and talking to them personally, that's made me also have the realization that I don't want to add to the problem and take up a bed or not be able to have a surgery or something like that.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat, which I think is kind of getting to this point. They put a blog post here, and it says there's an article from the Utah Avalanche Center. It isn't promoting risky skiing, but it talks about how a risk assessment shouldn't be different now than it is any other day. So is there any comments on that?
I think that is totally hitting the nail on the head.
I mean, for me,
oh, sorry. We should be going out into the backcountry thinking of all the possible risks that could happen every single day. So maybe this is putting that at the forefront and making it a little bit more inherently, like, before you go out, checking all those boxes. But yeah, maybe that's something we should be thinking about all the time, as opposed to just right now.
Yeah, Emily, I haven't read the article if it's saying that we should be treated differently or if we shouldn't go out. For me, it's just standing organizations that I'm connected with, you know, Rocky Mountain Rescue here.
And we lost Jason.
That's the first time we lost someone, so
Man.
we've been doing okay. He's just poof, he's gone. Oh man,
his internet was starting to go out, so
there he is. He's back. What were you saying, Jason?
Sorry, guys. I mean, I just had two comments on it. One is, like, I'm not sure exactly what the article is getting at, but for me, it's about that social responsibility of the group voice. And so the local mountain rescue organizations in Colorado have asked us not to go. And so I'm just supporting those communities. But more on that, you know, outdoor sports are incredibly selfish, right? Like, for me to go alpine climbing, pretty selfish, but I'm willing to accept that risk, you know, as a dad, as a partner, as a, you know, putting other healthcare workers in harm's way, potentially in normal times. But, you know, much like Michelle said, folks that work in healthcare have asked us to tone it down. And so it's made me look at my own acceptable level of selfishness. And for those of you listening or watching, like, I'm not trying to be self-righteous, and I don't think, I wouldn't judge anyone. You're making your own decisions. But for me, it's making me reflect on my level of kind of selfishness to go recreate.
That makes sense. So, I mean, this isn't the only conversation shift that's happening out there in the market. Jeanine, I'd love to get your take on what you're seeing from the shift in consumer attention. Like what's going on in the, like, I'm a perpetual marketing nerd, and I know that you're constantly like looking into that as well. And so I'd love to hear what you see in the conversations right now from just like the consumer brand side of our industry.
Yeah, it's funny because I work primarily in two capacities. Either I support marketing teams and comms and PR, which seem to be a little bit more like in crisis mode when it comes to like communicating with their, brand consumers, like how do we talk to them responsibly, and what is the right way to talk about, especially in the outdoor space, like being a part of this community right now. And then on the product side, the other capacity I work in is helping designers and product developers plan and execute product. And that's interesting because they still have their heads down. It's almost like they haven't skipped a beat in terms of like designing and creating products, because they're still working 2 years in advance in terms of like the product cycle. So I'm having like very different conversations with both teams. So, on the creation side and the product side, it's like, okay, what will consumers expect from us as we come out of this from a product perspective? They're going to expect, durability, products that will last, products that will be timeless, products that will be authentic to the brand DNA, products that will be useful, right? So like if you've already got that built into your brand infrastructure, you should be set, you should be solid. A lot of outdoor industry brands are kind of playing by those rules. We create meaningful products for meaningful activities that are also meant to protect us in extreme, scenarios and environments. So we're kind of already a little bit ahead of the curve when it comes to that. And then on the marketing side, it's just about like, well, what is going to resonate in terms of like storytelling and narratives? We've seen a big shift to, kind of, I call it kind of like content at the speed of culture. We've seen this shift towards like more timely, less perfect, less polished storytelling. Things are becoming a little bit more real. They're becoming more visceral. We're being invited into people's homes right now. Like we're all looking at our homes and our home offices and broadcasting like these personal moments. And brands are like, well, how do we fit into that equation? So I think we're going to see the end of like these very like perfectly polished moments, and everything is going to get a little bit more human, which feels really lovely. And one other important thing I think is worth noting about specifically the outdoor industry is that, as an industry, we've been on the forefront of fighting, climate change and taking a stance on public lands and rallying and supporting and uniting it with one voice. So we've kind of got a lot of practice doing this, and it's an opportunity for us to lead and to show other industries, to follow that example as well. And there's been such an incredible shift from so many outdoor brands, from really big brands to small brands, that have been doing their part to like shift their mindset, so shifting production from footwear to masks, or shifting production from technical outerwear to surgical gowns. Like we have the know-how, we understand how to make products that need to serve a specific set of needs and criteria, and everyone's kind of putting that IP to work. And that's also really fascinating.
I love that you talked about the that brands are catching up to the need to be more personal right now, right? I think that this is something that innately in the outdoor industry, like we have always, as a community been more personal, more open, more just like behind the scenes. Like if you look at the earliest, what became known as vlogs, like high style, like Casey Neistat kind of vlogs on YouTube, go back 6 years from that, and the vlogs were travel adventures, like, right? It started from people taking a camera and showing where they're, and so I think
high production quality.
Yeah, so I think our industry has always had a pulse on that. And actually, even like in my side of like the software and tech world, like the most successful ads that like I've ever run have been just like me on an iPhone, just walking down the street and then on an Insta story. And like it's amazing to see the general market catching up to the fact that like, you don't have to be overly polished. You don't have to be, you know, a corporate brand to connect and to create and, you know, move the needle per se.
Yeah.
So,
I think I mean, in these scenarios, we see, you know, people turn to the arts. They turn to writing, they turn to reading, they turn to being creative, they turn to painting. Like, this is so much creativity, and so many new perspectives will emerge out of something like this, you know, even to, you know, you guys' points earlier, you know, like you're thinking about trips you want to take and different ideas you have for when this is over. Like, we're going to come out of this with a whole new view of the world and how to engage with it, to be creative and to be scrappier. Honestly, like, not needing all the bells and whistles, just kind of that one-on-one innate connection where we're speaking genuinely from the heart to each other is going to be really beautiful.
Yeah, I love that. And kind of along the same line of questioning of what is going to look like when we're done with this, or whenever that is, we don't know. But we did have a question about someone who was planning on transitioning before this from corporate to an outdoor industry career. That won't happen for a while right now, but interested in our perspectives on, or your perspectives on, how this will change the outdoor industry job market after this.
Oh.
Keegan's little.
Yeah, the question means nothing now. There is a child.
Sorry, there's a cutie in there.
No, just kidding. Hi.
Oh.
Like, this is a beautiful thing. It's like, we don't have to shun our kids away. It's like, bring them in to the conversation. This is the duality of all of us. We've always kind of like, our personal and professional lives haven't been able to overlap, and that's now going to be the new normal.
Yeah. There's no work-life balance. It's work life. That's what it is now. And it's always been trending that way, but this is like forced adoption of that.
Oh, cool.
So I guess back to the question, I guess, from what your perspective is of opportunity in the outdoor industry. Like, at what point is there something to seize and make that career change?
And I think too, just even more like, how will it change after this? How will the job market change? I think a lot of this is pretty uncertain, but if anyone has any initial thoughts on that.
I think, just from like where I sit, and I'll make this brief because I'd love to hear what, you know, everyone else's perspective is, but the supply chain is going to be dramatically changed after this, and that will affect everyone from hard goods to soft goods suppliers and vendors and manufacturers. So like, we do still need to see how that course correction like shakes out. So I think we need a little bit more time before we can give any, like, there's no data yet really to support it. So we're still kind of too in it to see how we're going to come out on the other side of it. So that's just from my perspective where I sit.
Yeah, from my side of things, I mean, fortunately, I wear a few different hats, so I'm able to spread myself out for a little bit of financial security. But guiding is, you know, it's a gig, right? So seasonal workers, guides, people who work at ski areas, obviously heavily affected now. And the goal for most independent guides is finding ways to continue to connect with clients now, but also start booking in advance. So I do think it's going to do two things. One, it's limiting the supply, just as Jeanine mentioned, for actual getting out with guides. So I think prices are actually going to go up a little bit because there's going to be a high demand for people booking to get out, to get on these trips, get on these adventures. But I think it's also going to help, not necessarily help, but it's going to force a lot of gig-based outdoor employees to think about stability and things like that during times like this.
And I was going to add, not from any expertise of knowing anything about the market, but just kind of a moment like this, I think, does make you kind of evaluate what you do with your time. And if you're in a corporate job and it's not fulfilling you, and, you know, that may have stability, but that show, you know, we're showing in this environment, you don't necessarily have stability in that either. So, you know, if your kind of heart is telling you you want to go do something, then maybe this is the catalyst that creates that shift. Because you just say, I don't know how much time I have. I don't know what the future is like. Things can happen, but can I be doing with my time what I really want to do with it? That's kind of what the cancer experience taught me is, yeah, I can be out doing all this stuff, but what do I really want to spend my time with, just in case I don't have as much time as I think I do. And I think that this situation is for sure kind of making me revisit that idea again of, okay, what do I really want to do? So that would
Yeah, that's really powerful.
No, I agree with that. I think that to sum it up, there's no particularly right moment ever to change careers, to start a business, to have a child, to like there's never the right moment, right? And so maybe right now, while it might not look like the perfect time to make a career change into an industry that is so uncertain, that is kind of on pause, that there's like, even from a demand planning side, as Jeanine was mentioning about like, hey, we don't know how many people are going to buy these helmets that we're sending to Michelle to test in the mountains so we can plan our campaigns. And then we overestimate production, and like so much is uncertain, but at the same time, like now is a good time to find your blue ocean opportunity based on really understanding like introvert expection, what you want to do, right? You can work towards what you want at any time.
I want to add one thing. You just made me think of something, Jonathan. I heard recently something, it was probably like a meme or something on social media, but it was like, we've been orienting our life around work. We've been told that we have to orient our life around work to survive, to be successful. But like, what if we oriented our life around family, or whatever our definition of family is, right? So the word family is subjective here. It could be like the thing that makes you the happiest, or the thing that's safe for you. So what if we oriented our lives around that thing, instead of just this like very Western kind of version of success, which is work? And I thought that was really fascinating.
Yeah, I love that.
For sure.
I think it's also a good time to reread or read for the first time In Praise of Slowness. Great book.
Yeah, I read that.
Forces you to slow down. And there's some great practices in there that I certainly forgot about. And going back to, a 9-to-5 really busy job, and this forced slowdown has made me rekindle a lot of those.
It's a great book. Well, I want to let one last question here land, maybe on Michelle. The question is from B Jackson 210. Will you change anything in your lifestyle or way you balance your work and life after quarantine?
I think, again, kind of hard to answer that. I think for me, something that I've been consciously trying to shift is, having these outdoor adventures close to home. And that's a little bit difficult in my situation because a lot of my job requires me to travel as much as possible. But I think that this can help all of us reevaluate, like, the adventure out your back door is, and getting to know your back door, like your backyard, is equally as enjoyable as traveling to other locations. And hopefully, I don't know, the way that I'm kind of seeing it is that maybe we'll get loosened up to be able to recreate closer to home before international travel happens, for example, and kind of falling back in love with your place of residence is pretty beautiful, and you can have so much fun in your backyard. And I also am lucky living in Lake Tahoe that it's so accessible, but I think, finding new ways to be creative in your backyard is kind of something that I see shifting for sure.
You're so right in that we so often don't pay enough attention to the things that are just close around us. It's like I went to Belgium with my wife years ago, and we were marveling at like these buildings there and like what the architecture looks like, and then came back to Boston and we're like, this looks exactly the same. you just don't notice your backyard oftentimes. Well, thank you so much for joining us here. This has been awesome. Really appreciate you spending some time on Saturday here to be a part of Stoked From Home. Michelle, Keegan, Jeanine, Jason, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I think one thing that I'll add just before we sign off here is, tensions are running high, like all over the world right now. And I think that one thing I've noticed in going out and walking on my street, or, doing anything that's essential business outside my home, I think it's really important to continue to pass like just kindness to people. And those simple acts of kindness lift each other up, but it's okay to smile and say hi and be really courteous when you're 10 feet apart or 6 feet apart. So just remembering to do that on a daily basis, that's something that we can all collectively do.
Love that.
Some great note to end it on. I love it. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Of course.
Good to connect with you all.
You too.
Have a good rest of your day.
Okay.
See ya.
You too.